We are not, a straight line. Our health and our well-being and how we respond, it's up and down, that we go up in waves. And in my line of work, we use this framework called the window of tolerance, where you've got this window where you're able to respond. You might have responses, they do tend to fluctuate depending on how you're feeling, but it's when we go outside of our window of tolerance is where our responses can become, rather than responding proactively, we can react to certain situations. So how do we keep ourselves in that window of tolerance is by taking care of ourselves.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and this is Hello Anxiety. In a world that often moves too fast, we're here to pause, breathe, and understand anxiety together. Each episode will explore practical strategies, share honest conversations, and uncover the science behind anxiety and well-being, all while creating a space where it's okay to not be okay. Let's continue this journey together. Hello listeners, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Thank you for joining me. I love your company every week when our episodes drop on a Wednesday. I just love hearing the feedback about the podcast as well. So please keep it coming. It's so appreciated. I read everything that comes through. I'm joined today by a guest who, as I heard her speak from the stage whilst we were both presenting it at a parent event, I thought, I really want to ask Jess if she'd join me on my podcast, because today's guest, Jess Homicki, is a social worker and with so much expertise in the area of anxiety and really supporting children and families who have been impacted by trauma and disadvantage as well. And when Jess and I were both at this particular event speaking to parents, the work that we did and what we both shared was really complementary and really supportive, and I thought I'd really love to bring Jessica's voice onto the podcast. So to share a little bit more about Jess, she is the Uniting's team leader for the School Attendance Support Program, as well as the Southern Melbourne Group Work Program, and has, as I mentioned before, she has over 10 years experience really working alongside families in need of extra support. So Jess, a very warm welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for saying yes.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited.
Oh, it's something we're both so passionate about, isn't it? And I know that one of the things that I really want to talk to you about first are sharing what are some of the signs and symptoms of anxiety in primary school kids, because whilst anxiety affects absolutely all of us. It's very normal. It can show up in different ways. So if we could I guess I'm going to break this into two parts. Could you please just, for listeners who have just joined us, a very warm welcome if you're new to the podcast, could you please share how you define anxiety if a parent was to say to you, what is anxiety? Like, what is this thing we're dealing with? Could you maybe start there? And then I'd love to start to talk about what does it look like, especially for that younger age group, that 5 to 12-year-olds?
Yeah, so anxiety can show up in so many different shapes, forms, sizes for everyone. It's very unique in how it might present in people. And when you're talking about anxiety, you've got, a bit of a spectrum. You've got, anxiety, it might be an event or something that causes someone to feel distressed or worry or anxious. But if that person is experiencing prolonged distress or exposure to a stressful event, then that can really formulate into feeling anxious about not just that trigger, but also other things in their life as well. So it can become something that they experience on a more day-to-day basis. And how it shows up is really unique for the individual and the young person. So there's, I guess as a child, you're still really learning how to express your emotions, understanding what you're feeling and how to express them. So it can show up in all different types of ways. And when you're feeling anxious, it might show up as, feeling withdrawn. It might show up as feeling really quiet. And then on the other side of that, it might show up as really, overt behaviours in terms of aggressiveness, or it might be, really big emotions in how they're displaying their distress.
I think it's so important for us all to know that, because the way anxiety shows for me, and it's my breathing that gets affected. And for listeners, I was just saying I took my kids to the orthodontist this morning, and so it took longer, the appointments, than I predicted. And I'd sort of gone, right, I've got to go to the orthodontist, take the kids back to school, come into the studio, get all set up and everything. And I was anxious that I wasn't going to be on time, Jess. That was really because I actually had in mind that our recording was starting 15 minutes earlier. I thought we were 12:30 today, not 12:45. And I was like, oh, so I'm still and that's the thing, isn't it? Like, anxiety will show. And it's just because like I was actually early because I had that 15-minute gap. And here we are, we're all set up. But it doesn't just switch off straight away, does it? Like when young people feel anxious, and it shows the way you've described by being withdrawn or big emotions or even avoidance, which we'll get to, that even though maybe the thing that they're anxious about might be past, the physical experience of it isn't just like switched off, is it?
That's right. That's right. It can stay there. You've got to take that time to regulate and calm, and sometimes that can take much longer than we as adults might even think that a child might need. So, and every child looks a little differently, and it depends on, even just thinking through what their experience has been like throughout their childhood as well, in terms of how long that might take in order for them to be able to regulate and come back down to a base level as well.
And you have worked for so many years with families who have experienced trauma and disadvantage. And what have you noticed about sort of the levels of anxiety in the children in families where a trauma has been experienced, or there's been significant disadvantage, whether or not that's related to financial disadvantage or to mental health of a parent, or maybe some sort of significant sort of life event?
Yeah, and I think generally speaking, when you're talking about early childhood experiences, it's often there's this focus on parents, and I just wanted to acknowledge that every parent has their own experiences as well growing up, and a lot of the times children experience trauma or disadvantage because families are under so much pressure, and that pressure can look like so many different things. But a child, the way they grow up, and I bring this back down to what we call attachment theory, in that those early experiences in children and their relationship to their primary caregiver can really help set up the way they view the world and how they experience the world. So you've got different types of attachment that might come about based on their experiences. So children who have experienced, maybe their needs have been sometimes met, but maybe not always met, their ability to trust and feel like the world is a predictable environment for them can vary. So that's they tend to be more on hypervigilance and the hyper alert, and they tend to try and really seek connection in those behaviours as well. So I guess children who have had those early life experiences can tend to maybe feel take them a little bit longer to regulate themselves as well.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because it's so out of our control as parents, isn't it? The things that we experience and the way that we can parent based on what we're going through. And I experienced postnatal depression with both children, and I remember that my depression was just so debilitating, especially with number two, which was our daughter, that I had no joy in my life, and I couldn't even I didn't feel like I could sort of engage and connect with her, but I pretended to. I would force a smile, and not, towards the end where things were getting really bad, I ended up going into a mother-baby unit, and I remember them doing an assessment, and they were checking our attachment. They would, for however the intake officer was kind of observing the two of us together, he said to me, as hard as this has been, and I know how difficult this has been, he said, she's really beautifully attached. And he said, I can just tell by the way, she smiles at you. And she did light up, obviously, my heart and everything. But when you've been through that with parents, you've seen how that can affect them. And I just thought, oh, gosh, like I was sort of lucky in that it didn't have a significant impact on her, but I couldn't help what I was going through. And
that's right.
Yeah. For parents,
and so many parents can't help, what they've experienced, what their life experiences have been. And where they are at the time that they have their children as well. It's there's so many pressures out there on families at the moment that there's, I guess, all of these compounding pressures that can sometimes happen in a family's life when they have kids, and it just it's out of our control.
I think that idea of what's in and outside of our control, if we can even just pause sometimes and reflect on that alone, I think can help. But how do you support parents who are struggling, with the kind of the circumstances of their own day-to-day life, and are struggling to kind of, really, I guess, give as much to their kids as they would like, or they just, they love their children, of course, but just don't have much left in the tank, and are just maybe struggling with their mental health, or the financial stress or other challenges in their families are so great, who might be relating to this and thinking, well, I don't know what else I could do.
Yeah, and I think the first, I guess, recommendation or encouragement I'd always say is, one, be really kind to yourself. We so often are so harsh on ourselves, and we're our own worst critics. And I think, think of yourself, even sometimes put yourself in the position where you might be giving yourself advice as if you're giving it to a friend. Because sometimes we are so much more compassionate and kind to the people around us rather than ourselves. So that would be my first advice. And then I think prioritizing what you think is the most important. And I think sometimes we have so much pressure from services or families or friends, or all these external expectations that are put onto us as parents. And I think sometimes just having the confidence to say no, actually, I think I might say no to that, and I might focus on this, which is really going to fill up my cup today. Some really simple strategies when you feel like you just don't have time to be able to do anything at all. Take moments to have drinks of water throughout the day, deep breathing, going for walks where you can, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, just to get outside for a walk is really helpful. But I do think that as parents, we do need to take the time to take care of ourselves and fill up our cups so that we can respond to our children as well. Because, we all are human and we all feel dysregulated, and we all have moments where, we need to take care of ourselves in order to take care of others.
It's so well said. It's so true. And yet sometimes I think we feel that we have to be kind of, available if we're in the company of our kids. I was talking to my daughter the other night, and she's 15 now, and we've had some pretty big chats lately, and some of them have kept us up really late, like 1:30, 1 in the morning, because you just don't know as a parent when you're going to be needed. And I felt like I really did have the bandwidth and I felt that I had everything I need to really be there for her at those times, which was really good. But it did make me reflect, and I said to her the next day, I said, look, always going to be here from you. We can talk about anything, as she knows. But I said, I also recognise that there have been times when I could see that you needed more and I didn't have it to give. And I would sort of say, look, not if she's, particularly distressed or anything, but just I'd kind of say, look, is it all right if we pick this up tomorrow? Because I just knew I couldn't give what I needed, and I felt really guilty about having done that, but also knew that if I had have tried to kind of plough on through, feeling like I was running on completely empty, that I wouldn't have been able to listen and concentrate and empathise and support and be the parent I wanted to be. And so I've had the guilt about that, because we can't always be on, can we? And
you
fully
can't
available.
always be on. We're still human. And I think, you just said that, you want to be able to give that space and time that your child kind of needs in that moment. But sometimes we also need to be self-aware in terms of how are we able to provide that and are we able to give that. And sometimes it is okay to say, are we able to pick that up, tomorrow? I love you and I'm listening to you, and I really want to be able to be there for you. Is it okay if we reconnect tomorrow and keep this conversation going?
Yeah, I love that you're normalising that. I feel better already. Thank you. One of the things that I know that you're really conscious of are the gaps in services and supports, because we do know that anxiety is just at a crisis level. We've seen, especially obviously we record in Melbourne, like we're both Victorian. Melbourne had the greatest lockdowns. We know that there was a doubling of anxiety in the child and adolescent population after COVID. Obviously, we're years down the track, but there's such a hangover from that. And I wondered sort of, for families who are sort of thinking, I'm noticing this in my family. I'm seeing anxiety that's sort of hanging around, becoming more of a problem, maybe getting in the way of some normal kind of day-to-day activities, and I'd like some help. Well, can you help sort of talk us through some of the services where there are service supports and where some of the gaps are, so parents can kind of like, put their time and energy into where they can get the best help?
Get the best help, yeah. And it is, like, I'm just, going off what you said about, the COVID-19 lockdowns and the follow-on impact of that. And I think some of these experiences or distresses about school and anxiety around school were present before COVID, but this huge event that took place has definitely exacerbated that. And, even just thinking back into the national inquiry into school attendance and where that sits with, we do have huge numbers of students feeling anxious about attending school. And, although it's, 3 years on COVID, we've still got, students who are going into prep now, where at that time in their life, they were learning that their world around them was quite shut off, in that they were only allowed in their home at the time. So it does, they didn't have the same social engagement interactions that children prior to lockdowns have had. But I do find so my program, the School Attendance Support Program, works with primary age students from 5 to 12 years old. And I have found that, we are quite unique in our local area. We, are funded through some local funding sources, but there isn't really a statewide or even like a national response to primary age students around school attendance and supporting students to be able to engage in education meaningfully. So we are quite unique in that space, and there isn't really another service or availability for a support like ours out there. But I would say for parents, if they are experiencing anxiety from their student or from their children around attending school, I would recommend there's some really wonderful parenting groups out there that can really help. I also supervise the parenting group program for the Southern Melbourne area, so I do feel a little bit biased in this, but there are some wonderful parenting groups out there, even just thinking around like our Tuning Into Kids groups and our Bringing Up Great Kids groups and our Circle of Security groups as well, are just really wonderful evidence-based supports for parents to be able to emotionally attune to their child and, be able to feel like they have the tools in their toolkit to be able to respond to their child's needs, including anxiety and other emotional responses. So
it's wonderful work that you're doing, and I'll put the links to those in the show notes, so we'll be able to do that. And of course, we have a beautiful international audience here, but the resources are there, and if they're accessible via the web, anybody obviously can use them. But it's such an impact when, like, on the whole family, isn't it, when school attendance is an issue, and sometimes it's called school refusal and often referred to as school can't, and it affects the whole family. The stress of the parents wondering, am I going to make it to work on time? When is this going to get easier? What's tomorrow morning going to look like? And it can actually sort of really create a lot of anxiety in the household. And then there's a brother or sister who's like, well, I've got to get to school, and what's it mean for me? And just the general distress of the poor child. And for a parent listening who's thinking, that's putting my hand up, we're kind of going through that at the moment, what would be a first kind of step, would you say, for let's look at the kind of the extreme example of a child that hasn't been going to school for a little while, and the parent would like to turn that around? Where's a good place to start? Where's a good place to start?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think generally when you've got children who aren't able to get to school, that's generally the behaviour, but there's so much more that's underneath that behaviour. So, really trying to be curious and understanding what it is that's causing your child to feel so distressed about attending school, and approaching that curiously. And it's very likely that parents have tried that with their children. And sometimes, depending on the age of the child as well, they're not quite able to articulate exactly how they're feeling. But I would be curious, and I'd be kind of getting in touch with the school, letting them know that you're having these challenges in the morning or getting them to school. I would be really encouraging an SSG meeting or a school support meeting in some way, just so we can have open communication with the school and other supports that might be available to them through the school. Each school is quite unique in the type of supports that it can offer. So it does vary, but sometimes they do have wellbeing supports, mental health supports, or psychologists that are available on site. And I would recommend even just, seeing your local GP. You can access mental health care plans through the GP. There's also some wonderful resources online through the Kids Helpline, which can be really helpful. They can really help understand and unpack what a child might be feeling in those moments and what resources are available out there for families as well. So there are resources out there. I guess the 5 to 12-year-old age group, where these big emotional responses are kind of coming out a bit earlier. There's not a lot of mental health supports available and affordable to families in this space at the moment. So it is a bit of an area of need. Yeah.
Costs can be really prohibitive. Really make be a barrier, I suppose, can't it? Even just a GP visit, like where my GP clinic is bulk billed for children 14 and under up to 3 p.m. And so if you are working and you can't take your child sort of during school hours, and I think it's $100 out of pocket for me every time I go to the GP. So even just a GP visit. So finding somewhere that bulk bills. So here in Australia we have Medicare, of course, and there are lots of bulk billing clinics. So I always sort of say ask around. Word of mouth is often really good, because if you get a personal recommendation from another parent perhaps, then you'll hopefully find a GP that feels like a good fit for your family. But the work that you're doing around school attendance support is so important. And I know that there is also a big Facebook group, I think, in Australia called School Can't Australia. So if you are on this journey with your child, join a group of other parents so that you can get that support. You're not alone in it, but it is really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not alone. And I think that's a lot of the feedback we get from our parenting groups, is that's one of the biggest takeaways, is that connection and point of connection with other parents who are experiencing very similar challenges. I think you're definitely not alone. And school, when a child is feeling distressed about school, it's a whole family that starts to feel those impacts, like you mentioned earlier. So it is a stressful and emotional journey for us all.
And one of the things that is so important is for parents to look after themselves, for us to look after ourselves, but we often put ourselves last, don't we?
Certainly do.
We give and we give and we give, and so many of us are, working and parenting and Uber driving our children everywhere, depending on the age of them, and also maybe caring for someone else, maybe an older family member. I know that's true of so many people. What you said earlier I really loved, because, the thing about our well-being, and I define well-being as feeling good and functioning well. And, we don't feel good all the time. That's not normal. I'm not talking about sort of generally, feeling happy, but if we can sort of check in with ourselves, feeling good and functioning well as kind of being a bit of a benchmark, knowing that feeling good goes up and down, but the regular kind of investments in ourselves, rather than, we could take ourselves off to see a movie, or we could go to the park for a lovely walk and do things like that. But sometimes we don't have the time for those things, but the regular, just like you said, just hydrating and just taking some breaths and doing that sort of at times during the day. I think a lot of parents feel like, oh, there's no time for me, I've just got to keep giving. But it's also not role modelling really good messages for our kids as well, is it? Like, we don't want them to be, we want them to be different, but we have to kind of show them too, don't we?
That's right. Kids learn so much from what we do, not what we say. So role modelling how we take care of ourselves and kind of role modelling some of those strategies that you might be doing and saying, like, and being open with them around your own vulnerabilities and feelings. You know, I'm feeling really worried right now. Or, you know, this work meeting I've got coming up is making me feel really anxious inside, and I'm going to take a few deep breaths, and this is what I'm going to do to try and help myself feel more regulated. Because often we do, like just the way you explaining this wave of, you know, we are not, you know, a straight line, our health and our well-being and how we respond. It's up and down, that we go up in waves. And I think we, in my line of work, we use this framework called the window of tolerance, where you've got, you know, this window where you're able to respond. You know, you might have responses, they do tend to fluctuate depending on how you're feeling, but it's when we go outside of our window of tolerances where our responses can become, rather than responding proactively, we can react to certain situations.
Yes.
So how do we keep ourselves in that window of tolerance is by taking care of ourselves. So.
I saw a great little video on Instagram the other day, and I thought it was such a good metaphor. And it was the psychologist, whoever I was watching, she had this balloon and she'd blown it up, and it was fully blown up. And, you know, that would make some people anxious, thinking, is it going to pop? But it was so full. And she said, every time we take those moments to recalibrate, to sort of settle our nervous system, and to, when we talk about the nervous system, sort of, you know, move from that sort of sympathetic response into the parasympathetic, that more rest and digest response. It's a bit like letting a little bit of air out of the balloon. And so, you know, let's say your balloon feels like it's going to explode, and then you just take 5 minutes out just to sit, have a mindful cuppa, meaning you're actually paying attention to what you're doing. You're thinking about the warmth of the cup and the smell of the coffee and the, you know, the taste, and not just scrolling on your phone whilst chugging caffeine. And then maybe doing a few rounds of cyclical breathing, or just a nice little long exhale. That those 3 or 4 minutes can kind of let some air out of that balloon, and all of a sudden the balloon's got some more capacity, and that brings you back in that window of tolerance. And so then when somebody comes barging in and says, oh my gosh, like, you know, something's falling apart, you know, immediately your balloon might inflate a bit more, but there's a bit more room for you to cope with that. So I hope I've described that metaphor in an audio version that people can picture. But we can't underestimate it, can we, Jess? Just how important that is.
Yeah, that's right. I love that analogy, the balloon. I usually use a cup filled with water and then it overflows if it gets too big, but I really love the balloon.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think we often give so much, and we forget to fill up our own cup, or we forget to let the air out of the balloon sometimes, to give us that more space to be able to respond, and have more space there to be able to respond when things do come up. That's a beautiful analogy. Yeah,
it's a good one, isn't it? And we do want to respond. We do want to have... I was on a podcast the other day as a guest, and I've been thinking of this idea of, you know, have you ever been to on the tube in London? Have you ever been over to the UK?
No, I haven't. No.
Have you heard the expression mind the gap?
Yes.
Yeah, mind the gap. And it's so funny when you're there, because you hear the English recording of it. And I'm like, we've got to find the gap. We've got to find that little gap between when something happens and the way we respond to it. Because when we've got that tiny little gap, then we can think a little bit more and respond rather than react. So I just heard that the other day, mind the gap, and I'm like, I don't know how my mind works in really weird ways sometimes, but it just got me thinking, you know, sometimes these things are a bit more relatable. It's like if we can just find that little gap, and if we can regularly look after ourselves during the day, then we create, you know, we can give ourselves a bit more room in that window of tolerance. And when something does go wrong, we're in a better place, you know, and especially if our kids come to us and, oh my gosh, Jess, I mean, you must see this all the time, that parents who are stretched, who are struggling, and things are happening, you know, maybe their child comes home and something terrible's happened, like they got embarrassed for some reason, or they fell from equipment, or somebody said something, or they bombed out in something they were really excited about, all the normal stuff that happens in life, but it just can be so devastating that we want to be able to not necessarily kind of show how painful that is for us as well. Like, do you talk to parents about that? Because when our kids are hurting, we're hurting so much. And I try to say, like, keep a neutral face, Jodi. Like, try not to kind of show it on my face how much it upsets me as well. What do you talk to parents about this sort of thing?
Yeah, because I mean, that's so normal, right? When you're like, our inkling as parents or as caregivers is we want to protect and shelter our children from experiencing anything that's going to cause them distress, and that in turn, hearing about it can cause ourselves to be distressed as well. And I think that's a human response. And I think even just saying, oh, that's, I'm really sorry, like, that's actually, really hard for me to hear as well. And taking that time to kind of even just go, let's do some deep breathing together. Or even often we say to parents, we've got this strategy that we use, which is from the Australian Childhood Foundation, around stop, pause and play. So if we're feeling ourselves becoming distressed or impacted, that we can take a stop and take a moment and really reflect on what it is that we need in that moment, what it is that our child needs in that moment. And then once we've kind of had that moment for reflection, maybe it's taking a couple of deep breaths and asking ourselves these questions, then we can press play again and we can respond in a different way. So we do often use that resource for parents too. It's
so good. It's so good. And it's okay to not necessarily straight away kind of know what to do and how to help, but that Absolutely. Just to, like you said, a bit of, the validation and the empathy. And I often when I'm presenting to groups of parents about anxiety, I'll use this kind of framework of that validation plus confidence equals support. In, if we're coming back around to sort of the anxiety conversation, it could be just a really normal anxious moment, like putting your hand up to be a school leader and putting, I know my son wrote a letter, and it's quite a vulnerable thing to do, to kind of put pen to paper and put your heart on your sleeve, so to speak, and share who you are and why it's important to you and why you're striving for it. But there's a risk of failure, and just really kind of like normalising that anxiety, that it's really normal to feel a bit anxious, that outcome is unknown, this is something you really care about, but also showing that confidence that, that I know you've got this, I know you're going to write, a really beautiful letter about who you are and why this is important to you. And so you're showing your children that, it's really normal to feel how they're feeling, and helping them to realise that, it's normal to be anxious about something you care about, especially when you don't know what's going to happen. But you've also got that confidence in them, and help them have that confidence in themselves without overplaying it. And, we don't want to tell our kids that they're the most amazing kid in the world, they've got it in the bag, because, of course, that's potentially setting them up for failure too, and that's not being honest, because we don't know. How do we know? So, I think that right. Validation plus confidence equals support, I think, is a good a good approach. But sometimes anxiety is just so overpowering in a family's life, in a child's life. And one of the things that I just wanted to come back to is avoidance, because it is so part and parcel for anxiety, isn't it? Can you just help listeners understand, why is avoidance like so much part of the picture when anxiety shows up? And when it comes to avoidance, whether that's school or whether that's camp or whether that's anything that feels anxiety provoking that kids don't want to do, maybe share some insights for parents before we finish up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think this is a really tricky one. So I know for myself, when I'm feeling a bit nervous, or I myself experience anxiety too. So I know when I feel anxious about something, my go-to response is to try and shelter myself from feeling that anxiety. So what I do is I try and avoid what it is that's causing me to feel anxious, because that is the most effective way to get rid of those anxious feelings is to take away the thing that's making me feel anxious. But I think sometimes being able to recognize that I'm trying to avoid this situation because I am feeling anxious, just be then drawing on my resources in terms of how can I push this and how can I get myself out of my comfort zone and push through this feeling so I can, do something challenging and rewarding. But often kids don't have that skill set yet. So we do, as parents, try and supporting them to build up their resilience and their ability to cope with some of these worry feelings or these anxious feelings that might be coming up for them. Talking through this cycle that sometimes happens when we're talking around avoidance. We have an anxious feeling or something that's causing us anxiety, and then we might withdraw, or we might display some of those behaviours or those anxious behaviours we talked about earlier, and then we come back around the cycle where the parent's feeling, I don't really know how to help support my child, except for maybe I just want to protect them from this thing. So I'm going to say, yes, maybe let's not go to school today because it's obviously causing you so much distress. And then that child feels instantly better. And it's like, okay, that was exactly what I needed. Now that anxiety is gone, I'm okay. But then the next day comes around and they're, okay, now I've got to go back to school again. And now all these feelings are still popping up for me. And it can follow this loop and this cycle around in that I guess the child is learning that the best way to cope with my anxiety is to avoid the thing that's making me feel anxious.
That's it. That's it's so well put, that vicious cycle, and it's almost like the brain is detecting some sort of a threat. School for some reason feels threatening and creates these anxious feelings, and when mum or dad says, well, okay, you don't have to go, it almost kind of reinforces, oh, there was something dangerous. I'm good to avoid that. And then so the fight gets harder, doesn't it, as the days, that the further entrenched you get into avoiding something, the harder it is to kind of like move through it. But sometimes it can catch you unaware, because sometimes we don't realise what's happening, and all of a sudden a little new habit or behaviour is starting to sort of creep in, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, hang on a second, I can see what's happening here. So you've just one last question, because one of the things that is so paramount for every single one of us, adults, kids, teens, everyone, is our sleep. And I don't know whether or not you've come across this in your work, but when we're struggling with sleep and we're not getting the sleep and the rest that we need overnight, our window of tolerance is often more narrow. And we also know that when we're sleep deprived, and when anyone is sleep deprived, that the just our emotional regulation is compromised, and so we can sort of be more reactive to the things around us. If there is a parent listening who has a child that maybe doesn't want to sleep in their own bed because they feel a bit anxious about not being with mum or dad. Now, Jess, this is not necessarily something that you might have had a lot of experience with, but for the parent listening who's like, okay, my preppy is in bed with me each night and I'm not getting the sleep I need, they're not getting the sleep I need, and I can see that this is a pattern that is a bit embedded, but we want to change it. Is this something you've come across? Because I hear this sometimes from parents, and wondered if I could pick your brain about it quickly before we finish up.
Yeah, and I think sleep is so important for all of us as parents, as kids, to be able to set us up for the next day ahead. And I think there's oftentimes we're working with families around implementing changes in family routines and what that might look like. And I think small achievable steps in terms of how we might achieve that, in terms of what's going to work best for their family, but even having an open conversation with the child as well, in terms of how are we going to make sure that I get sleep and you get sleep as well? How can we do that? How can we work together to achieve this goal? Do you think this might help? In offering some choices in terms of some small steps that might be able to help. So, just increasing that window. I don't want to say window of tolerance, but increasing. I'm just thinking of our circle of security group, where we have, the safe hands, and we have the circle that comes out, and we allow children to explore that circle, but we're always here to be their safe hands, and we catch them when they come back, and that circle then increases and increases with age. But I'm just thinking in this scenario, those small steps where we're increasing their circle a little bit more each and every day, so small steps at a time, and doing that in partnership with your child as well. They might come up with some solutions, and then they might be more invested in what that new routine might be looking like for the family too.
Yes. I remember I had my little, I mean, this was a bit different, but I had my little bubba in the bassinet beside me. And because my friend lent me this amazing bassinet on wheels. It was just like everywhere I go, I could just wheel the bassinet with me. It was so, and we've got floorboards everywhere, so it was super easy. But I was a bit anxious, and so I had Bubba sleeping next to me. And then Bubba got used to that. And so essentially, as I weaned myself, because the babe was young, I just remember just sort of, I knew it was important that babe slept in their own room. I'm just not disclosing gender here because my kids don't love me talking about them, but I would just start with it just at the entrance to the room, and then a little bit down the hall. It's like I'm moving the distance little by little so that I ultimately but sometimes it's about being a little bit creative. I think doing it together, and also knowing that it's not a straight road, is it? It can be a little bit up and down. It can be a little bit 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. But knowing the ultimate goal and kind of knowing that the benefits for everyone are just going to be so incredible. Especially for a parent, I just think that time at night when you can have your kids in bed and have a bit of time before you go to sleep, it's just gold. It's gold. So it's a good thing to work towards.
And any change in routine can be really hard. Because like you said, you can go 2 steps forward and 3 steps back a little bit because, changing routine is hard, and kids are going to be kind of, wondering how that's going to feel for them. And some of these things as well, listening to you talking about the experience with the bassinet, it's also around your own feeling as a parent as well. Sometimes it can be really hard to let your child go or let your, put in place these boundaries for ourselves as parents. So small steps can help.
Yeah, you're so right. It's really good that you've raised that, because there is grief and loss along the way for us as parents. Absolutely. When we're no longer reading to them in bed, or they're no longer holding our hands. We never know when that last time will be. Of course, we don't want them in their bed when they're 20, in our bed when they're 21. We don't want to be reading them books when they're, 17. We don't. Obviously, I'm saying that in jest, but we know we want them to grow up to be independent, to do their own thing. But I think it's nice to acknowledge that along the way, the things that we let go of as they become more independent, because we're doing what parents are meant to do, that it can be a bit painful. So I appreciate you acknowledging that, because I think if we can think about ourselves and give ourselves the comfort and the compassion that we need to know, well, this is a change for them, but it's a change for us because there's something really special about those times together as well. So, Jess, thank you so much for your time today and for joining me and having this really lovely conversation and sharing your expertise. You've got on the ground, sort of boots on the ground experience working with families, and so grateful for you, for sharing your wisdom with us today. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jodi. Pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a look at the show notes in the whichever podcast app you are listening in to learn more about the things that we have talked about today. And please share this with a parent if you know somebody might need a little bit of extra help or support, or just to feel a little bit less alone. Thanks for your time. Thank you for sharing this time with me on Well, Hello Anxiety. Remember, understanding anxiety is the first step to managing it. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Take things one moment at a time. Focus on what you can control and know that you are not alone on this journey. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and I'll meet you right back here next week.